Catus, Maximus here, this time with a review of an open-end V-groove universal wrench. This is actually the open-end brother to a video I did probably a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, about the box-end version. And somehow magically, like a month later, the open-end version came out. I shouldn't say came out, showed up, and now the box-end version has its brother. To tell you the truth, the nature of these wrenches, I think that the open-end one is probably just a little bit more useful than the box version. Of course, the issue with these wrenches is, of course, they just have these little V-groove teeth, and they promote you to really strip out fasteners because they can only sit on one side, and then just a corner of the fastener sits in one of the teeth on the other side. And if you're not paying attention, then you just end up stripping off the corner of the fastener. They're kind of real basic for like installing swing sets. You're not going to rebuild a semi-truck with one of these. But what I was noticing is that the open-end one is probably a little bit more useful, I would say, than the box version. The box version, to try to keep the head of the box a bit more narrow, the V, or the taper, is actually in the opposite direction, where of course on the open end they don't really have a choice. They have to make the narrow end towards the body of the wrench. But there is a technique to using these that I was corrected on, and that technique is that you try to put the pressure on the side that is flat against a toothed jaw. So like on this one, you would pull the wrench tight and then you'd try to put it right in. It doesn't work super well, particularly on the box end one. It seems to work a little bit better on the open end version. But the idea is you put it on like this, you'd have the flat there, and like say if you're unthreading, doing counterclockwise, you try to both push the wrench on, and it still kind of skips. But the idea is that you push the wrench on and then try to push to put the pressure on this side, but it never really wants to work like that. Still wants to slip around, and these things just don't work very great because of course they're putting all the load on just one of the fastener corners, and it just wants to strip and grind out the fastener. If it happens to be a very hard fastener, then it strips and grinds out the teeth. And so that was really the issue why these things never caught on, is because they just don't work that well on hex fasteners. They work better on square head fasteners just because, you know, you have wider flats, and there's a bigger transition and distance between the flats and the corners. That's the issue with the hex. The more sides that you get, the more circular the item is. The reason six-sided fasteners are common is just to make it easier to give you be able to turn the fastener every 60 degrees when you're using like an open-end wrench. That's essentially why six-sided fasteners became a standard. Anyway, some other differences I was noticing besides the angle of the V-grooves is the fact that, of course, on the open-end one there's just a lot more meat to prevent the jaws from splaying apart, versus on the box one, since it's supported on both ends, is much thinner. The box one also has an S shape, where the open-end one is a kind of a U shape, and I thought that was a little bit odd. I believe these are both from the very same manufacturer. One thing I thought these would be handy is more hanging up near power tools, because there's lots of tools, all sorts of tools that have like little thumb screws, say on this old Rockwell router, where you want to get these reasonably tight, so like on this router so the base doesn't become loose, but then they become jammed up, and then you're like using pliers, which really beats up these types of thumb screws or wing nuts. And of course the box end version would work too, but something like this, you could just take this V-groove wrench, and since it is a V-groove wrench, it'll work on a variety of sizes, and then you can just use this to quickly loosen or to give it just a little cinch. And I thought that's really what these are useful for, because of the nature of the V-groove. They'll fit on a wide variety of wing nuts, maybe, you know, like plastic kind of wing nuts, which have like a big center portion on them, and they're going to beat it up a bit less than, say, a pair of pliers. And so that's really where the useful nature is. But anyway, since I do a lot of tool reviews and I like document tools, I thought it was interesting that indeed there was a open-end version of the universal V-groove wrench. The other thing that's a little bit strange, I find, is the fact that this goes from 10 to 22, where on the box one it goes from 8 to 22 millimeters. That would also be 5/16 through 7/8, so this one is 3/8 through 7/8. So I thought it was a little odd that they didn't make this end just a little bit more narrow, but maybe they thought the teeth were just getting a bit too long. That's the only real reason. That and why it's not an S shape like its box brother. That also just seems a bit curious. But it certainly is heavy. They did throw a lot of metal at it, expecting you to be able to put a lot of force on a fastener. And the fact of the matter is, at least with hex fasteners, it's not going to make much of a difference because you just can't apply that much force with these type of serrated V-jaw wrenches just due to the nature of them. They were kind of like an interesting idea, but really they just don't have much use in the real world except for more of a novelty thing. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.